If you value deep history, practical knowledge, and the kind of skills that kept civilizations alive long before modern convenience, you are in the right place. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to Atten Recounts and share this channel with someone who respects history as a living library rather than entertainment. What we discuss here is not trivia. These methods fed armies, explorers, and entire cultures for centuries, and honestly, many of them still outperform modern techniques when applied correctly. For most of human history, food preservation was not a hobby or a trend. It was survival. Without refrigeration, chemical preservatives, or global supply chains, people had to understand time, bacteria, climate, and chemistry at a level most of us have forgotten. What makes these ancient methods so valuable today is not nostalgia, but reliability. They work off-grid, without electricity, and with minimal tools. That is why they continue to matter to historians, anthropologists, and survivalists alike. Drying food was the earliest and most universally trusted preservation strategy. Drying removes moisture, and moisture is what bacteria and mold require to survive. Archaeological evidence shows dried meat and fruit in Africa, the Middle East, and Central Asia dating back thousands of years. The process was simple but precise. Meat was sliced thin, salted lightly, and dried in sun or moving air. Fruits were halved and exposed carefully to avoid spoilage. Today, the same method works just as well. You can dry meat using airflow and shade rather than direct sunlight to preserve nutrients, creating a shelf-stable protein similar to ancient jerky. Dried apples, bananas, and herbs can last months when kept dry, exactly as they did in Roman and Persian households. Smoking food combined chemistry and patience in ways ancient people deeply understood. Smoking does more than dry food. The smoke deposits antimicrobial compounds onto meat and fish, slowing decay dramatically. Indigenous cultures across Europe, North America, and Asia built smokehouses specifically designed to control airflow and temperature. Cold smoking fish over several days preserved it without cooking, while hot smoking both cooked and preserved meat at once. You can still apply this method today using hardwoods like oak or hickory, keeping temperatures low and steady. Smoked fish, when properly cured first, can last weeks without refrigeration and months when stored cool, a technique still used in Nordic regions. Salting food was an early mastery of microbial control. You see, salt draws moisture out of food and creates an environment where bacteria simply cannot thrive. Ancient Egyptians packed fish in salt. Romans cured pork into forms recognizable as early ham, and traders preserved meat for long journeys across deserts. The key, really, was saturation and time. Thick cuts required heavy salting and resting periods to allow penetration. Even today, dry curing meat with salt alone still works when done carefully. Pork belly cured with salt and thyme becomes shelf-stable pancetta, and salted fish can be rehydrated later, just as sailors did centuries ago. Fermentation preserved food, while, interestingly enough, increasing nutritional value. Fermentation is controlled decay, and ancient societies understood this intuitively. Vegetables submerged in brine produced lactic acid, which prevented harmful bacteria while enriching flavor and digestibility. Sauerkraut, kimchi, and fermented grains were not cultural accidents, but survival strategies. You can replicate this by submerging cabbage or root vegetables in salt water and allowing natural bacteria to do the work. Proper fermentation produces food that lasts months, sometimes even years, without refrigeration, and remains safer than fresh produce in unstable conditions. Pickling extended shelf life through acidity rather than salt alone. Pickling uses vinegar or acidic brine to halt spoilage. Ancient Mesopotamians and Indians preserved vegetables this way long before glass jars existed. The acid environment neutralized pathogens while locking in texture. Today, pickling cucumbers, onions or eggs using vinegar and spices creates long-lasting food that requires no refrigeration until opened. The principles, honestly, have not changed in over 2,000 years. Storing food in fat, created natural oxygen barriers. This method, which was known historically in Europe and Asia, involved cooking meat slowly and then sealing it beneath a layer of rendered fat. Without oxygen, bacteria really struggled to survive. Confit is probably the most famous example of this technique. Duck or pork, cooked and then submerged in fat, could last for months in cool storage. You can actually apply this method yourself by slow cooking meat, covering it fully with rendered fat and storing it sealed. But, this method requires discipline and cleanliness, just as it did centuries ago. Honey preservation, interestingly, exploited one of nature's most stable substances. The ancient Greeks and Egyptians stored fruit, nuts, and even meat in honey. Honey's low moisture and antibacterial properties made it nearly immortal, really. Archaeologists have found edible honey in sealed jars that are thousands of years old. You can preserve garlic, berries or herbs by fully submerging them in raw honey, creating food that lasts indefinitely if, of course, it remains uncontaminated. Grain storage relied on dryness and isolation, not technology. Ancient granaries were engineering feats, really. Raised floors, airflow channels, and sealed containers protected grain from moisture and pests. Wheat, barley and rice stored dry can last decades, Modern application is simple but strict. Airtight containers, desiccants, and stable temperatures. This is why ancient civilizations could survive famines and sieges. Root cellaring used earth itself as preservation infrastructure. Root cellars maintained cool, stable temperatures year-round. Potatoes, carrots and apples stored properly could last through entire winters. You can recreate this using underground storage, insulated boxes, or even shaded pits, applying the same principles of airflow and humidity control. Pemmican represented the pinnacle of ancient preservation efficiency. Developed by indigenous peoples of North America, pemmican combined dried meat, rendered fat, and sometimes berries. It was calorie-dense, shelf-stable, and nutritionally complete. European explorers adopted it because nothing else lasted as long under extreme conditions. You can still make pemmican today using lean dried meat and rendered fat, producing food that can last years without refrigeration. These methods remind us that ancient people were not primitive. They were precise, observant, and deeply knowledgeable. Every technique here is testable, repeatable, and proven by centuries of survival. If you found this guide valuable, subscribe to Atten Recounts, share this video with someone who respects real history, and continue preserving knowledge the way our ancestors preserved life itself.